Hi, welcome to our Marketer's Content Playbook Session Q&A. In her Content Playbook session, Changemakers Publishing and Writing's owner, director, Jenny Graham Scott, shared insights into the power of writing and publishing a book. Jenny, thank you so much for being here and for submitting a presentation. We really appreciate it. Let's start by having you give a short recap, and then we can open the floor to questions.
Sure. Well, what I did in my presentation is I talked about how the book can give you additional credibility and visibility. Another thing that's important is being able to put this on multiple platforms. So once you take your material, you put it in a book, or you could put it in a blog and then create the blogs into books. So, you basically have different ways of expressing your material, and you can promote it in different ways through the social media. Besides the blogs and articles you can do, you can also put this into a video presentation, in a PowerPoint presentation, and you can do clips of it. You can have a longer PowerPoint presentation. You can turn it into a course. You can turn it into a webinar. So there are multiple ways of doing it. Now, you may not have time to do all of this, and that's where hiring a ghostwriter can help you do that. And so that's one of the things that I do is I specialize in ghostwriting books and scripts. Now, another thing that people will do is they'll also turn something into a documentary. So you can create like a 30-minute documentary to present your material, and then that could be a lead into the book, or you have a gift from that you can give as a way of getting people's emails, and then you send them newsletters. And so there are multiple ways of increasing your credibility, driving traffic to your website.
Awesome. That was a great, concise summary of everything you talked about.
Okay.
So the first question, I know in your presentation you covered how there's like several ways that somebody can go about starting to write their book. One thing I really appreciated about that was the fact that it seemed a lot more accessible to somebody who's never been in the industry before. And I was wondering, in your opinion, of those different ways that you can get started on writing a book, which ones did you personally find the most success in or enjoy yourself?
Well, one thing that I find that is helpful is if you create an outline for it. So that could be if you're doing a series of blogs, you organize the blogs in such a way that they become chapters of the book. Or after you've done the blogs, then you think about ways of organizing it into a book. You could also, I like to just write directly onto a computer, and then I do a first draft, and then I do an editorial polish. But some people who don't have the time or the interest in writing, or they may not feel comfortable writing, and their modality is speaking. So then it would be better for them to, say, talk into a recorder, or sometimes I interview people because they might, where we prepare questions in advance. So you have an outline of what you're going to talk about rather than just extemporaneously just starting to talk.
Awesome. And that actually leads really well into my next question, which is, I was wondering, as opposed to like going the self-leading direction, what do you think are the biggest benefits of going with a ghostwriter instead?
Well, one thing is the time element. People may not have the time to do it themselves, and a ghostwriter can take it from there. Another thing is that sometimes you want to support your presentation with research. And so you might not have time to do the research, or for example, I work with a team of virtual assistants or VAs. And so if there's a lot of research, then I will have them go and find articles, and then they send them to me. If it's just a small amount of articles, say maybe a dozen articles or so, it's just faster for me just to do it myself. And there's so much is on, you go onto Google, you put search terms in, or you go into Amazon and you put search terms in about that. You find out what other books are out there in the marketplace, because you want to distinguish your book from other people's books. So those are some advantages. Now, another thing that a ghostwriter can do is they might help you clarify your thinking and position what you're saying into a more coherent or organized way than you might present it. Now, because we speak very differently, then we will write something. Writing is much more linear and organized, whereas you might speak, you go on tangents, and that's great to integrate you or relate to the audience. But in a book, it becomes, just a lot of extraneous detail that you want to get rid of. Now, another thing that a ghostwriter can do is they can bring their expertise in a particular area. For example, I specialize in business books, in books about social issues, crime issues, And so I have a background in those particular areas. And so a ghostwriter can bring that. And then the person can decide if they want to credit the ghostwriter, such as with a with credit or an and credit, which many people do. But otherwise, it's just a work for hire, and you don't have to mention who the ghostwriter is.
Understood. And is there like an industry standard if somebody was looking to hire a ghostwriter on what that tends to cost, or does it really range?
Well, a lot of it depends on the experience of the ghostwriter. And I mean, you could find people who just graduated from college or in another country who might not be all that familiar with English. And so I've known people who've done that, where they hire somebody for $25, $50. And I mean, you essentially get what you pay for. And more experienced ghostwriters will be charging anywhere from $125 to $200. So, like I'm right in the middle of that.
Okay. And so if somebody was to come to you and, tell you that they were interested in hiring you for ghostwriting, what are the things that you would ask for them to bring to you to the table for you to get started?
Well, one thing I want to clarify is, have they written anything already? Do they have drafts? Do they have notes? Another thing would be, how do they prefer to do this? Do they prefer to talk about it? Do they prefer to just give me notes? How much research is involved? And then if they have notes, I would want to look at them. I mean, sometimes people will draft up a book. I'm working with a client now who has written 55,000 words. Well, when I looked at what he had done, a lot of it was biographical material about other people, family members, and so on, that's really irrelevant to his story. And so a lot of that would be just eliminated. And so it really depends where the person is in the writing process. And you have to be able to assess that in advance to know. So it's hard to give a blanket quote. So what I often do is I will start somebody with, let's do a proposal first, or let me do the first 10 pages. And so then I get a sense of it. Or I have a review process where for a few $100s, I will look at their manuscript, give them feedback in terms of what should be done. And if it needs editing, I'll edit a couple of pages to give them a sample.
Okay. And so if it's a nonfiction book, how do you go about with names to people? Can you use real names of people? What is the legality of that?
Well, a lot of that depends. I mean, if it's, all positive material, I mean, it may be fine to include somebody. And if it's true, there's no reason not to include that person. But if they're citing somebody who's written a book, for example, fair use means you can cite about 100 or to 250 words of somebody's book. But beyond that, you're doing too much, and you need to get permissions. And if it's a published book, you need to get permission from the author, from the publisher. Or if it's a speech somebody has made and you've recorded their speech, again, the fair use would apply. So you can only quote so much, and then you have to get permission. Now, another thing is if these are negative things that you're publishing about somebody, if it's in a court record, you can use that material. But if it's private information, you may need to get permissions or vet it with a lawyer. Now, I know, there's a lot of political things that are being written right now. And if somebody's a public figure, you can say a lot more about them than you can if they're a private citizen. So there are all those issues. So there are copyright lawyers who handle that kind of thing, or people who deal with privacy law.
And on that note, what kind of protection does somebody need for their ideas? And at what stage in their writing, should they really be considering that? Can a publisher or agent steal your ideas?
No, I mean, that's not really a concern with publishing. It's different with writing a script, because the script writer is really the low man on the totem pole in the music, in the film industry. But in publishing itself, they want to have the author be, a spokesperson for their work. And so it's unlikely that they're going to do anything to steal their work. I mean, it's very unlikely that the agent is going to say, oh, this is a great idea, I'll just give this to my other person. Because people have certain ethics that they follow, and somebody would, they want to be known for their own work. They don't want to get a reputation of stealing other people's material. So that is not a likely kind of thing. I only copyright something if it's actually published. And in many cases, I've published so many books that I haven't really tried to copyright anything, or many of the things. But if they're published by a traditional publisher, usually the publisher will set up the copyright under your name, but they take care of the details. But your material is copyrighted from the day you put it into a written form or into a speech form that can be transcribed. But if it's just an idea, you can't copyright ideas. You can't copyright titles. And so if it's just very vague, you really want to spell it out. And that's one of the ways a ghostwriter can help, is to help put some of these things in a form that they can be copyrighted. And that's different from registering the copyright is when you go to the Copyright Office. Okay.
And in your experience in ghostwriting, have you found it to be a pretty consistent, or do you find that like your role as ghostwriter varies in different ways and you serve different purposes for different projects?
Well, it varies very much, because some people they have all their material done and they really want what's called a developmental editor to organize their material, sort of polish it up. Other people may have very disorganized material. I'm working with one client now who kind of skips around in about 1 year, the present, then we're in the past, then we're back in the present again. And it's very hard to follow, even in talking to her. She sort of rambles off. So a ghostwriter, may need to really organize it. So I've told her to, think chronologically and then describe these incidents as you in a movie, for example, where you see scenes of the movie, because a lot of times people will write things out and it's more like an outline for what happens, because you want to add in dialogue, you want to have the reader feel there. And often writers who aren't trained writers don't know how to do that. And so it becomes very dry just reading, well, this happened, and this person said that. And you really want to turn that into dialogue, into action, and to, set the scene for the person.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So of course, we're approaching everything from a really marketing heavy standpoint. So when you're writing a book, are you ever involved with like the marketing component of it and trying to make sure that it winds up in like what you consider to be your demographic for it?
I do some of that in terms of planning and policy and their positioning. When it comes to actually posting things on a website or posting things in the social media, I work with a team of virtual assistants or editorial assistants or executive assistants, or whatever you want to call them, who do the actual postings. So that can become a fairly routine sort of process. And there are also various platforms you can use, like Hootsuite or Constant Contact or Aweber, that once you put something out there, you can put it on multiple platforms. Like I already use Hootsuite. I use Medium to put articles out, and then I get a link to the article, and then I've been doing Hootsuite to 9 different platforms. And then that takes a few minutes to do, so that's really easy. But beyond that, there are dozens and thousands of websites. So you really need people who specialize in that area, and that kind of thing can be anywhere from $10 to $50 an hour for somebody working as a virtual assistant, and people in other countries are usually less expensive.
Got it. Okay. And I know you touched on this at much greater length in the actual presentation. But let's say if we're going through the lens of somebody who's writing a book for the first time and they are very much outside of the industry, what do you recommend as the best way for them to find like a publisher or agent? Like what direction would you steer them in?
Okay, well, there are a couple of things there, is whether or not their book is appropriate for a publisher or agent, because you can always self-publish. One thing to do is to try to find a publisher or agent. Now, I have a company that I work with, publishersagentsfilms.com, that will connect writers to publishers and agents, and it basically uses an email platform that where we have a database of a couple of thousand editors and publishers, and then they're targeted based on different keywords. So if it's self-help, it'll go to certain editors. If it's business, other people. If it's social issues, if it's memoirs. So it's targeted based on that. And somebody can do this themselves and do the research and take about 20 or 30 hours to do it. But this systematically helps to do it. And we also help with writing the query letter. People can do their own letters, and then I also review the letter to make sure it's a good one, because a lot of times people put too much detail in it. that's not necessary, because you want to basically send out highlights of it and then let people who are interested contact you, and then you send a proposal. You don't put any attachments in these. You want a really quick read. So that's in terms of if you're trying to find a publisher or agent. Now, many people who are in the business area or in the self-help area, it's very, very competitive. And one of the first things they're going to ask for is, what's your platform? Which means, you have this visibility already. So unless you have something that is so super unique that it can stand alone, which most self-published books and business books don't do, you need that platform. So that's where self-publishing can help, because you spend a couple of years publishing your book, get credibility, visibility, do all this promotion, build your platform, and then on the next book, you're ready to go to a publisher agent. Now, they're not going to take a book that's already published unless it already has a huge track record. So you really want to come up with a follow-up book.
Got it. Okay. You also mentioned the similarities between publishing your ideas through a book versus a blog or website. And what ways do you think that a book differs in terms of audience engagement and general distribution?
Well, I mean, the book has more detailed. So often a blog can be an introduction where you have a little bit of a teaser for the book, and then you go into more depth. So often people use this blog or the article as a free gift where you have highlights or summary of the major points, and then it's a free gift to people. You get their email, and then you tell them about the full book. So that could be something to do.
Okay.
Okay, can you just take 1 second? Okay, sure. I'm going to just let that go to voicemail. All right.
Sure, no problem.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So,
Changemakers Publishing, writing, and
sorry, let me get back to it. Okay, so one thing that I was wondering when we were talking about ghostwriting, do you feel that like a ghostwriter helps bring some of the tone to the book? Or is their job really to help like the person hiring them find their voice, and like the ghostwriter should kind of like not be distinguishable?
Well, as much as possible, I try to use the person's voice and get a sense of how they want to present themselves. I mean, in other cases, I mean, like I mentioned, if it's all rambly and that kind of thing, you want to consolidate it and make it more, to the point, but still use their voice. And also, as a ghostwriter, I will do a draft, send it to the person, and so they can give me feedback and say, oh, well, no, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say it this way. And so it becomes a learning process where you gradually get a better sense of what the person wants to say and how they want to say it.
Okay. And back to publishers and agents, what does the writer need to have like to gain the interest for a publisher or agent? And is that different for fiction versus nonfiction?
Well, it is very different. With fiction, the book stands on itself, and the author does not need to be as much of a promoter as somebody in a self-help field or a business field. What they can bring, if it's nonfiction, I would suggest that they start building a platform as a speaker or doing workshops and seminars so that they get known. And then they also build up a following so that they have, 10,000 or more followers on Twitter, on LinkedIn, YouTube. So anything like that. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, well, I've got 300 followers or I've got 1,000 followers. Well, today that's not really much. And so, they want to build on that. And, they just have to understand that the publishers are looking for, the big books. Now, there's smaller publishers that people can go with, and you get certain credibility. There are more academic or niche publishers, and you're not going to expect to get even in advance. I mean, many of them will not pay, pay you anything up front, or the advances are $500, $1,000, $2,000. So they're really small. What you do want to avoid are these publisher marketing packages, where they may charge you $20,000, $50,000 to do your book. And, it's very inexpensive to self-publish a book. If you want to go on Ingram Spark, if you want to go on the KDP, which is the Amazon platform, on Kindle, Drafted Digital. So it's very easy to publish that. And we have a package of a few $100s if somebody doesn't have the time to do it themselves, because most of the platforms are free, or they're small charges with Ingram Spark for accounts. But these other companies, I mean, really what they're promoting is the marketing of it. Now, some of them may legitimately do a lot of marketing. Others may offer people opportunities that they really don't do very much publishing. And some of the bigger companies now have these offshoots, like Wiley has an offshoot, and Balboa Press, Hay House has Balboa Press. So they will publish somebody under the imprint with the larger publishers, but often they have requirements that you have to buy a certain number of books, like with Wiley, maybe 10,000 books. And so if you're speaking and you have a way to distribute those books, that could work really well. But if you don't have that access to an audience to sell books, you just end up with a whole lot of books. And some of them will sell you the books at more the retail price. So you're not getting, like with KDP, I buy it at the printer costs. So I pay maybe $2 or $3 a book, whereas with markup to a wholesaler, it becomes about $10. So there's a minimum price. There's a whole lot of details about getting your book published and what the costs are going to be. But I usually recommend that people understand that there are these publishing companies that are really, sort of printers that with marketing abilities.
And if a writer wanted to go like the ebook direction instead, are there alternative methods for effective ebook distribution other than aggregators?
Well, I mean, there's Kindle. There's also Draft to Digital. There's Smashwords. Now, if you're on Kindle, you want to make sure that you don't have a KDP exclusive arrangement with them, because in that case, they have a 90-day period where you have to be exclusively with them. And then so you want to make sure you don't do that. You don't have extended distribution with them. And then with these other ebook distributors, you can choose one. Smashwords is one of them. Draft to Digital. Draft to Digital, I find, is a little bit easier to work with in terms of uploading things, and it's a little bit more complicated with Smashwords. But either one is good in terms of. But you choose one of those.
Okay.
What was the rest of the question about the promoting ebooks? Now, they have various promotional packages you can get, the different companies that offer ebook distribution. And so with ebooks, I mean, it's inexpensive, so you can offer them easily free when you are doing workshops or seminars, whereas you have printer costs with the paperback books. And again, you use the social media to promote the book. You can advertise the book. You can have special sales. You can set it up that for a week that it's free and for people to download it for free. And you really want to get the word out initially to establish your reputation.
For aspiring writers, do you feel that having a social presence is bearing a lot more weight now than when it used to?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, people are influencers, and if you can send your book to someone influencer and they talk about it, that could be 10,000 more sales. I mean, because they have millions of followers. So, I mean, there are all these different ways. And my focus is on the writing of itself, preparing it. And then I work with other people who do the promotion. I have a publicist I work with her for 10 years, who has media contacts, and she's based in LA. And so she can get people on television. She can contact the media. So you do these mailings to the media. You contact people on the phone, and the people who are publicists and specialize in that will already have personal contacts in the industry.
Okay, yeah. And I have one more question for you, which is if an aspiring writer were to approach you and ask you for the 3 biggest pieces of advice or most effective that you could give, what would they be?
Well, I think to have a clear idea what the book is about and who the audience is. And so then, get the material together to present it in some way. I usually suggest having an outline, or at least topics that you want to talk about, and then to develop that. And then I can help the writer create the subcategories and so we have a clear idea for each chapter what to talk about, and then think about, what is your budget for this? How much promotion are you going to do? And do you want to be a speaker? Do you want to represent the book in other ways, so that you have this whole plan about the book based on the topic of the book, who the book is for, and how much you want to do to market and promote it, because there are 1 million books or more published each year, and only a handful of them get recognized, and the people who are getting all the big publicity and being on the television shows, they're already famous in some way. So you want to think about ways to make yourself famous or stand out in your field.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Jenny, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Okay, good.